Hello fight fans, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for tuning back in for another episode of the MMA Girl podcast, episode 26. And thank you to all the listeners who are downloading my episodes every week. That is so cool. I'm glad you are liking what I'm producing at least. And thank you so much for my supporters on YouTube. Today we're going into the latest news from the MMA world, and of course we're going to be starting off with UFC Rio, which happened just this weekend in Brazil, in Rio of course, which was an explosive, insanely entertaining and sometimes confusing card. We have a lot to talk about over UFC Rio, and we have other news from the MMA world and the combat sports world in general to go over. Let's get into it. So UFC Rio went down this weekend. And honestly, I was so happy with my picks because, of course, I picked most of the right winners apart from the Ramos fight. Ricardo Ramos, of course, lost his battle against Genghis Khan Ofli, who won via first round submission, which was insane because he was standing up. Ricardo Ramos was standing up and he was submitted via rear naked choke, but standing up. When he was stood up and he was getting choked out, I was like, don't get choked out. He looked like he was going to be able to defend himself and get Khan Ofli off his back and stop the submission attempts. But unfortunately, that didn't work out for him at all. So he got the submission in, and of course, Khan Ofli got the win. So very happy for Khan Ofli, who was on a losing streak. So this must be a very joyful occasion for him to have won at UFC Rio in the first round, no less, of course. Let's go back to the prelim fights because we had some great finishes on the prelims fights as well. The first fight, Luan Lacerda got the win via submission in the second round of his fight. Crazy fight. Loved seeing Samuel Oliveira and Luan Lacerda fight. That was insane. Julia Polastri, oh my goodness, wasn't that insane? Of course, she won her fight via third round KO over her opponent, Carolina Kawa. Now, Carolina was putting up a really good fight. She was obviously two rounds down after the first and second rounds. Her team, of course, her corner was saying, you need to do everything in your power to win this third round to get a finish here. And I think a finish for Carolina wouldn't have been impossible because she was landing some great lefts and rights. However, Polastri was just incredible, and she of course got the first bonus on this card, which was completely deserved. An amazing performance from Julia Polastri, who, despite being signed to the UFC for the last 3 or 4 years, has not fought that often in the UFC. So she has fought 3 times, I think, since she got signed to the UFC. So hopefully this fight at strawweight, where she got the bonus in the second fight of the prelim card at UFC Rio, will get her more fights in the States and more fights in general on other cards. Hopefully, maybe we'll see her start of next year because she'll be a great addition to a women's strawweight fight for sure. And a great title contender one day, I think. Beatrix Mesquita as well got a huge submission win over her opponent, Irana Alexieva. Now, Irana Alexieva was looking good. She was coming into this fight as the underdog, however. Beatrix Mesquita, of course, being a BJJ champion, coming from the UFC's BJJ roster, she had certain parts of her game that weren't 100%. Of course, her striking is not yet what it should be for MMA, but she is getting better and better. She's improving a lot, and she seems quite confident standing up, even though her strengths lie on the ground, of course. But she got the second round sub, which was, of course, very much expected. And I think at some point she could have got the TKO finish via ground and pound. So it was a great fight for Beatrix Mesquita. A great UFC debut as an MMA fighter, and she has a great future ahead of her. Another fight that I really enjoyed was, of course, Vita Petrino taking on Thomas Pettersson. Of course, Thomas Pettersson came in. Great ground game, however, from Thomas. He's a really good grappler. Vita Petrino obviously felt that quite a few times, but he was able to get that third round knockout, and it was beautiful. A clean knockout for Vita Petrino, and another great win, a second great win at heavyweight, and a great future for him at heavyweight as well. Jafo Filho got his first round submission over Clayton Carpenter. Beautiful submission from him. Love to see it. And in the last fight of the prelims card, of course, as I predicted correctly on my prediction video, Michael Aswell got the win. He got the first round KO over Lucas Almeida. Of course, Almeida was injured. I'll insert a picture here if I can find one. His hand at ceremony weigh-ins was noticeably swollen. And of course, that's probably why, and I think that's probably why they had to move the fight down to the prelims card. Or is it because we had a fight cancelled on the prelims card? Maybe they wanted to move a fight down from the main card to the prelims card, so that the prelims card would be as long as it was programmed to be, and they just finished the main card a little bit earlier. Maybe that's why they moved this fight down to prelims. In any case, Michael Aswell got the first round KO and beautiful, beautiful. And he mentioned at the end of his fight that his teammate Joshua Van was getting a title shot in December, on the 6th of December, no less, for UFC 323. And he would love a fight as well on that card. So maybe we're seeing Michael Aswell come back as soon as possible. Of course, you get the first round KO, so why not come back in 2 months? He'll be fresh, he'll be ready, and he's a young, hungry fighter, so I don't see why not. Now, as for the rest of the main cards, we've gone over Ricardo Ramos. As for the rest of the main cards, of course, I predicted that Mario Pinto would get the first or second round KO. He did indeed get the second round KO over Diniz. Now, Diniz seemed very powerful. Diniz was great on the ground. He gave a lot of problems to Mario Pinto. Mario Pinto did not get an easy ride getting that win over Diniz, but a great, great, great win for Mario Pinto. And what I did love at the end was that he was trolling Michael Bisping. I was just so confused.
Sorry, brother, I don't speak English. Agradecer a todo o apoio. Eu estou aqui. I'm going to speak English now. Forgive my English. So basically, I want to give a big shout out to my people in London and England. Thank you for all the support. Big shout out to my striking coach, Renan, who's helping me late at night, putting in that graveyard shift. That's 3 finishes now, including Dana White's Contender Series. I'm not in this league now to take part. I'm here to shut this down and put my name on the map. So you better recognize Big Bang Bosh, Shama.
I personally hadn't seen any interviews from Mario Pinto yet. I should have done because he's from my neck of the woods in London. And when I heard him talking, originally, of course, in Portuguese and saying to Michael Bisping, I don't know how to speak English, Michael was obviously like, okay, then let the translator translate. But then, of course, afterwards, breaking into a proper London accent, I was just like, you... What a funny guy Mario Pinto is. I love him. But I just love that personality. He's now 11-0, and he's a real problem for the UFC's heavyweight division. Of course, it's a small, restricted division. There's not many people on the roster in heavyweight. So going up to the top 10 and finishing top 10 opponents may be a little easier for newcomers in the heavyweight division. But of course, going into that top 5 in the heavyweight division is going to be the hardest part for Mario. And I think he's on the right path to get into that top 5 and potentially get a fight against someone who's really dangerous in the top 5. And maybe one day we'll see London-born, Portugal-born, Lisbon-born Mario Pinto from London face off with Tom Aspinall. He's already trained with Tom Aspinall, so which is not a surprise because they're both in the UK. But obviously, that's something we're going to be seeing in the near future, not straight away. But Mario Pinto, congratulations on your win. I loved his fight, and I can't wait to see more from him. We, of course, had Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez. And I have a question for you guys about this fight because, of course, in the first and second rounds, Vicente Luque was, of course, getting beaten down by Joel Alvarez. Of course, he was looking really bad, Vicente. And, of course, after the second round, during the second round pause, he expressed to his coaches that he wanted to give up. And his coaches asked him at several occasions if he wanted to give up. Now, he did look like he wanted to give up. I won't lie to you guys. I don't know what you guys thought of this fight, but I just found it a little bit weird afterwards because Joel Alvarez, he almost finished Vicente Luque in the first and second rounds. That's exactly what happened. He almost finished him. Going into the third round, I felt like Joel Alvarez stepped off the gas and just wanted to get through that round to win the fight, of course, to not humiliate Vicente Luque in his home country of Brazil. That's my own opinion. I don't know if it's true, but I just feel like the way that went down, I was very uncomfortable because I saw a Joel Alvarez who was ready to attack his opponent in the first and second rounds. And when seeing his opponent was almost going to throw in the towel, he then said to himself, nah, I'm going to step my foot off the gas and just get through this last 5 minutes, get the win via UD and be done with it. He could have got the finish in that fight. That is for sure. And I don't understand why he didn't want that finish. So it's weird. I don't know what you guys think of it. Let me know what you thought of the Vicente Luque versus Joel Alvarez fight. Of course, Joel Alvarez got a really nice win over Vicente Luque. Welcomed him to the welterweight division because, of course, Joel Alvarez is moving up from lightweight to welterweight. But I just found this fight a little odd in the third round. Let me know what you think. Of course, we had Davidson Figueiredo versus Montel Jackson. Watching the fight, saw Figueiredo win that fight. For me, Figgy did win that fight. It was a split decision, of course. But a lot of people are saying Montel Jackson got robbed. I personally don't think he did. I think that Figgy did enough to get that win due to his constant pressure, the 2 takedowns he was able to achieve. Figueiredo was constantly on his back trying to get a takedown, got 2 out of the 5 takedowns he attempted. For me, that's all it took to get that win, the control time and the ground time. So I think he got that win. Deiveson Figueiredo got that win clean, split decision. One of the judges, of course, gave the fight to Montel Jackson, but the other 2 did not. So for me, at the end of the day, that is the result that is given, and that's the result we have to keep up with. So sorry to those who think that Montel Jackson won that fight, but I don't think he did. And then, of course, we had our main event between Matthias Gamrot coming in to replace Rafael Fiziev against the beloved Charles the Predator Oliveira. But he's always been and always will be Charles Dubronx Oliveira. So for me, that will be the case as well. As soon as the bell rung in the first round, either way, I thought there was going to be a finish. If it came from Gamrot, I would have been surprised. If it came from Charles, I would have been even less surprised. This fight was full pressure, full gear ahead. Before the fight, of course, Matthias Gamrot was very motivated and sure of himself, and a lot of people thought that he'd win. I personally chose Charles because I didn't see him losing in his home country. I didn't see how that could have been possible in front of his people. He had so much weighing on this fight that I just didn't see how it's possible for Charles to lose, even though a man can lose with everything on his side and with all that pressure. Of course he can lose. But as soon as that bell rung, you could tell someone was going to finish someone. And this time around, it was Charles Oliveira. A very beautiful way to win. Didn't see Gamrot tapping, but he did. Gamrot did everything he could in his power to stop Charles Oliveira from submitting him. But of course, when you have someone on top of you like Charles Oliveira, you have very little chance to not get submitted. It's very difficult. And he's going to work on you for the whole of the round if it needs to be to get that submission in. And unfortunately for you, that was the case. So second round submission for Charles Oliveira, calling out at the end of his fight, of course, none other than Max Holloway, something that he obviously wanted to do since he was, talking about wanting to get back at Max Holloway for his loss to Max Holloway back in the day. And of course, this is unfinished business that now ties in the BMF belt. And Max Holloway immediately responded, of course, saying, I'm down. He's, of course, got unfinished business with Charles Oliveira. And this will be great because he says that he's willing to fight, but he wants to fight earlier than the White House card because Max is ready now. So he wants to fight early next year, maybe February, March, probably March time. And we need a pay-per-view for March. We need a big numbered card for March. So why not Max Oliveira? Charles Oliveira versus Max Holloway 2 for the BMF title in whatever country, in whatever town, whatever city you want, because that fight is going to be insane. But if, however, we see the same Charles Oliveira that fought Matthias Gamrot Saturday night against Max Holloway, then Max Holloway has no chance in hell to win that fight. He will get submitted straight away. But we'll see. Will Charles Oliveira want to go to the ground straight away with Max Holloway, or will they stay on the feet? I don't know. But I personally think that if Max Holloway is too dominant on the feet, then Charles will, of course, try and shoot for that takedown. And that will test, of course, Max Holloway's great takedown defense. And if he gets the takedown, then Max is cooked. I'm not going to lie. But we'll see. I don't want Max to lose in that way. But he, of course, is the BMF title holder. So he is, of course, a target, and he has a target on his back for many fighters who would like to hold that BMF belt. So Max Holloway, good luck to you, mate. I'm glad you said yes. And of course, Charles Oliveira is a great candidate for the BMF belt because he is a BMF. He is a BMF. And someone brought up the subject on Twitter. Are BMFs even BMFs? Or can someone be considered for a BMF title fight if they've already lost in their life? Because losing is part of being a BMF because it's coming back from the trenches. It's coming back from a loss that, like, for example, Max Holloway came back from a loss against Ilia Topuria to beat Dustin Poirier in the most amazing fashion via UD. Or just now, like Charles Oliveira, of course, coming after 3 months and 4 days after his fight against Ilia Topuria where he got knocked out cold. He then comes back in his home country and beats arguably someone who is unbeatable, at least unfinishable, in Matthias Gamrot in the second round. So he's come back from the trenches, he's dug his way back, and he's shown that he is a real BMF. So he has all the ingredients for a BMF for me. So I can't wait for this fight to happen. Of course, we have many amazing fights coming up beforehand. But that is, of course, a fight that is done deal because both fighters want it, and Dana just has to sign on the dotted line and get them to sign as well. And I cannot wait. So what did you guys think of UFC Rio in general? Were you guys happy with the fights? So let me know what you guys thought of it. Anyways, Let's get into some other news because we have quite a few things that have been happening in the world of MMA. Tom Aspinall, Mr. Thomas Aspinall, we were talking about him when we were talking about Mario Pinto. Tom has done quite a bit of media interviews coming up because his fight with Cyril Gane is in less than 2 weeks now, of course, in Abu Dhabi on the 25th of October. Early start time. Hang on, let me have a look. Because for me, it's going to be great. Oh my goodness. Main card at 8 p.m. in France. Can you believe that? 7 p.m. in the UK, 8 p.m. in France. I don't know what time it will be for you Americans, but it's not going to be a great time for you guys. It's obviously going to be lit from start to finish. And of course, we have the prelims card starting at 4 p.m. So I am off from 4 p.m. onwards and no one talked to me at all. But of course, this card is going to be great and we're getting an early start time for me and for everyone involved. But of course, some fans have been voicing some concerns considering Tom Aspinall's come out with some more sparring footage coming up for, of course, his fight against Cyril Gane. And people are saying that they are worried about his exposed chin because one thing is for sure is that Cyril Gane is a great striker. Of course, he's not someone who has much experience on the ground. He's still, and he has been in Abu Dhabi since I think for the last 4 weeks, because Cyril is, of course, training with some of the best elite wrestlers in the world. Some wrestlers from one championship, some wrestlers from PFL, people that he needs to improve his ground game. But is that going to be enough to improve his ground game against someone like Tom Aspinall, who's been born into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Of course, the answer is no. But if they stay on the feet, Cyril has, of course, a much bigger chance of getting that win. And the exposed chin is something that's concerning a few fans. But I just think that people, where they can, people will complain or people will say, oh, look, Tom's chin is exposed during his sparring. That's going to be a knockout for Cyril Gane. Just wait until we see this fight, guys. Cyril Gane is, of course, training a lot. Tom Aspinall is, of course, training his ass off, as usual. They both are. And we will see who is the best man on the day off. But I think that training footage and sparring footage is not 100% what we could go off of to judge whether or not someone is going to be knocked out by their opponent unless they continuously make the same errors. And Tom Aspinall has a very quick reaction when he gets hit, and he doesn't get hit that often. So when someone tries to hit him in the octagon, he dodges it like he's in the Matrix, and that is just something he's always done. So I don't doubt that Tom Aspinall may have a few of Cyril Gane's jabs that land, but the majority of those jabs won't land. I assure you guys. But whoever wins that day will be the deserving winner of that fight, and I can't wait to see those two in the octagon. Let's get back to a bit of UFC RIO because I forgot to mention this part. There was, of course, a fight that was cancelled, and that was Kamaru Usman's brother, Mohammed Usman, who was supposed to face Johnny Walker's little brother, Walter Walker, but unfortunately, at the last minute, or the day before the weigh-ins, Mohammed Usman was taken out of this fight because he had what is currently being said as a high level of testosterone in his blood, and it's a concerning level of testosterone to the point where he was, of course, taken off the card. Now, Walter Walker weighed in despite, of course, not having a fight, and he was very vocal about his disappointment to the guys in the room, and of course the video is on the internet now. I'll try and insert a clip of that.
It's ready for the motherfucker war, you know. I train a lot for this fight, and this motherfucker run. You know, I just want to ask UFC for me an opportunity for fight against Rio de Janeiro because it's my dream. 246. My dream fight Rio de Janeiro.
246 pounds for the number 15 ranked Walter Walker.
Look at that, shape in the heavyweight division. The best wrestler in the heavyweight division.
He did look really pissed. He said recently that he's on his way to Abu Dhabi, so maybe he's looking for a quick turnaround at UFC 321 if the UFC can figure something out for him at the last minute. And I'd love that for him. I'd love to see Walter Walker on the UFC 321 card. That would be an even bigger opportunity for him because it's a numbered card and it's a really highly anticipated card. So maybe we'll see Walter Walker have a quick turnaround and go and fight on the UFC Abu Dhabi card, as he missed out on fighting in Rio de Janeiro, where he's always dreamt of fighting. Of course, he's always dreamt of fighting in Rio de Janeiro. So the fact that that card was offered to him was probably one of the best news he's had in a while. And then to be taken off that card because of Mohammed Usman, not good look for Mohammed Usman, of course. We don't know anything more about his supposedly failed drug test. The drug test is from September. So, of course, it's impacting his work in October, which is not cool. So they're no longer with USADA. So maybe the results come in later. I don't know. But I'm quite disappointed with that, Mohammed Usman, if the case is correct and that he is using PEDs. Very disappointing to see that in 2025, guys. Even though we're no longer with USADA, that doesn't mean we can start juicing up. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it's just a mistake, but doesn't sound like it. Next up, we have Dustin Poirier. Just a little snippet. Of course, Dustin Poirier is one of my favorite fighters. I've always said that. And he is, of course, retired now since he fought Max Holloway at UFC 318. So now he's saying that part of him has died because he's got part of his personality, part of his whole being is no longer active, as he's no longer an active MMA fighter. But, you know, that's something he shared in a tweet recently. So I completely get it. I think all fighters must go through that same pain or when they retire of having that itch but not being able to scratch it anymore. And I think that he'll get through it. Of course, his wife is heavily pregnant. They'll be having their second baby very soon. But in the meantime, of course, that itch is not being scratched. And unless he gets back into some sort of ring or some sort of combat sports ring or octagon in the near future, as he planned to do when Zuffa Boxing was announced with Paramount, he may be stepping back into the ring for a boxing fight against Nate Diaz, as was announced a few weeks ago. So it's not the end of the road for Dustin Poirier in combat sports. I think he knows it was the end of the road for the UFC journey and for MMA in general. And I hope that Dustin Poirier doesn't decide to come out of retirement to come back to UFC, because for me, I think it was the right move to make with his life, his career, and the longevity of his career and the damage he's taken over the years. So we'll see what happens, of course. But Dustin Poirier, best of luck to you, Dustin, because of course it's going to be hard. But he should just stay in combat sports. Of course, he's at American Top Team. He should stay in combat sports in order to help other people get better and use his fight IQ to train other new fighters and still stay in the combat sports world, which I think he's already doing. So let's get into last week's Dana White Contender Series fight. Of course, we saw one of the most incredible UFC Dana White Contender Series fights we've ever seen, probably in the history of Dana White's Contender Series. And that's saying something, because we've seen some great fights on Contender Series, because these guys are going in there knowing this is their job interview. This is their last chance, or first and the most important chance that they'll get to signing a contract to be in their dream company. Every fighter going into MMA, of course, dreams of being in the UFC. So chasing that dream to the point where you're at Dana White's Contender Series, that is the last step to getting into a UFC contract. Of course, if you fail and don't sign your UFC contract at Dana White's Contender Series, no one says you can't do it again and try again and do another Dana White's Contender Series fight. But this fight is of most importance, the most important thing to any fighter when coming into the UFC now. Now, we had Mark Vologdin, face off, the Russian Mark Vologdin, face Adrian Luna Martinetti, who of course is from Ecuador. And they had one of the most entertaining fights throughout the whole history of the UFC's Contender Series fights, and maybe some of their main card fights in the UFC in general. We've never seen a fight end that way and have so much brutality and so much punching power. Vologdin, of course, lost via unanimous decision. Martini, of course, won that fight via unanimous decision. But both guys were awarded $25,000 in bonuses, which has never been done in the history of the Contender Series fights. And both awarded, of course, a contract, which happens sometimes when both fighters do perform amazingly. And of course, Dana White wants both guys on the roster to test them against some of the guys in their weight classes. So for these bantamweights, they both got contracts, and they exceptionally got $25,000 each for their performances on Dana White's Contender Series. And I was so impressed with both fighters, because at some point you could say Martinetti was going to lose via KO. At some points you could obviously say that Vologdan was going to lose via KO as well. But both guys were hitting each other so hard, and both guys had their moments in that fight, exchanging blows. And at some point, Vologdin, you could tell he was gassed out, but he was so determined. He was continuously motivated in that fight that he just didn't let anything get in his way of finishing at least that fight without getting finished by his opponent. And both guys were extremely resilient, and I was so impressed with that fight. I love watching Dana White's Contender Series, but that particularly was an insane moment. And they both, of course, deserve their 25 grand bonuses. This is historic. Of course, they will be known for this fight for the rest of their careers. So going into the UFC, taking a lot of damage, of course, to start the UFC career off. Of course, Vologdin got a huge gash on his forehead that Dana White kindly put in his story in full zoom, full flesh. His head was completely open, of course. He got his stitches done immediately afterwards. And now coming into UFC, we're going to see more of these two guys, and they are welcome in the bantamweight division. Cannot wait to see them face someone in the top 10. We're obviously not there yet, but they are welcome to the UFC with open arms by the fans, as they are with Dana White and all the staff at the UFC. Last bit of news is PFL. So the PFL have officially parted ways with USADA, following in the footsteps of the UFC, of course, since they parted ways with USADA last year. And now the PFL are doing it. So the PFL are going back to the Bellator system, because the Bellator use other organizations than USADA as well, and they're going towards the organization that Bellator used specifically before Bellator was bought by PFL. So now they'll be depending on the Mohiban tribe Department of Athletic Regulation to handle its drug testing now. And they said, and I quote, "This new program reflects PFL's continued commitment to athlete health, safety, and an even playing field across all competitions, including PFL World Tournament, Championship Series, and PFL's international leagues, PFL Europe, PFL MENA, and PFL Africa." So that's a PFL rep who told MMA Junkie that. So that will be the new proceeding for PFL from now onwards, with letting go of USADA as the UFC did. Good news, I don't know, but good news for the fighters at PFL. If this is going to be improving something for them, then so be it. It's good news. On other news regarding PFL, we have had PFL Lyon, which is happening in Lyon, as in France, of course, on the 13th of December. And of course, this was announced recently, and headlining this will be returning Cris Cyborg. Of course, Cris Cyborg, we've not seen in quite some time, so she'll be returning, and she'll be taking on Sarah Collins at featherweight. So this is a huge deal. She's in the co-main event. She'll be headlining this event with Sarah Collins, and also headlining this event is the return of Renan Ferreira. If you guys remember Renan Ferreira, he was knocked out brutally by none other than Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, of course, won the PFL's heavyweight belt, then of course never used it, never defended it, never came back to the PFL in MMA, went back into boxing, and he unfortunately fell victim to Francis Ngannou, did Renan Ferreira. So he got some very serious damage done in that fight. So we have not seen him since that fight. So he's coming back to reclaim his belt. So this will be a World Heavyweight Championship fight. And he'll be taking on Vadim Nemkov. And this will be in the headlining fights for PFL Lyon. And this will be a huge card happening in France, in Lyon. And very excited to see it. And it's also including the finals for the PFL tournaments for the bantamweight and lightweight divisions as well. So hopefully I'll be able to go to PFL Lyon if all goes well. And I'm excited. If I don't go, I'm excited just to be able to see these fights happen. Because Cris Cyborg, I can't wait to see her come back, and Sarah Collins, good luck to her. And as for Renan Ferreira and Nemkov, I'm sure that Renan Ferreira will be a strong favourite here in this fight. This will be a difficult day on the job for Vadim Nemkov, but I'm sure as he's accepted this fight, he knows what he's getting himself into anyways. So that is it for all the news from the MMA world I have for you guys today. Of course, the most important part was to get through UFC RIO and all that fun stuff. You'll be getting another video from me end of the week regarding UFC Vancouver. Of course, headlining that card, we have Reina DeRider, RDR, facing off Brendan Allen. It wasn't intentionally Brendan Allen to begin with. Of course, he's replacing Fluffy Hernandez, who, of course, unfortunately got injured before this fight could happen. So we're getting Brendan Allen versus RDR in Vancouver this Saturday, and I'll be doing my predictions and breakdown for that later on this week. So stay tuned. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.